Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video we're looking at signing from our past couple of days, a couple of injury updates, some waiver updates, plus we got some trade rumors involving the Senators, Canadiens, and the Canucks. And go to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Intended Hockey Channel. Now before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all your support. Now to help you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. And don't forget to comment down in the comment section below. So comments to today's video. So in today's video, we got another news and rumor video. As usual, I'll start off by discussing some signings for our past couple of days. You've only seen one signing from the past few days, and it was an interesting one and a very intriguing deal. And it was with Anaheim Ducks pending UFA for Frank Vatrano. Now Vatrano was entering the final year of his deal. He was scheduled to be UFA on July 1st this year. There was a lot of talk that he might get dealt at the trade deadline because the Ducks are an overly fantastic team and he was a pending UFA and could have given him an opportunity to go chase a cup this year, but instead they've come to terms on a contract extension, and the contract is as follows. Frank Vatrano has signed a 3-year contract extension with the Anaheim Ducks that'll be in the start of next year that has an AAV of $4.57 million. Now this is an interesting deal because the actual complete dollar value is $18 million, but the cap it's only 4.57 AAV because the Ducks have actually worked in some deferred money in this sort of contract. So basically it's going to be 4.57 AAV over the next 3 years. But the Ducks have deferred $9 million to start of 2035. So in 2035, for 10 years, each year, Vatrano will get a $900,000 payday each year after he's retired. And sort of like what happened in baseball with Dodgers Ohtani when he signed a free agent deal, Vatrano seems to be planning on moving out of California to a better tax situation in retirement and be getting money at that point. So it's an interesting concept. We saw deferred money, I think, with Fish Jarvis's deal earlier a couple of months ago. So it's an interesting concept, something that a lot of teams seem to be doing a little bit more. It seems like the NHL might want to start to try and get rid of this, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But Vatrano has signed a 3-year deal with AV of $4.57 million for the next 3 years. They'll begin at the start of next year, and they'll have some deferred money. They'll begin at the start of 2035, so an interesting note there. But Vatrano is a really good piece for the Ducks. He signed a 3-year deal 3 years ago in free agency after he had a pretty good resurgence, having a solid season with Florida, but then having a breakthrough portion of the year after being dealt to New York. He helped the Rangers go on a deep playoff run, so he was a really good piece there. Then he went to Anaheim, and since being in Anaheim, he's been a fantastic piece for them. His first year, he played in 81 games, put up 22 goals and 41 points. Last year, he smashed his previous career high totals, putting up 37 goals and 60 points in 82 games, nearly had a 40-goal season with Anaheim. So far this year, he's not producing as good as he did last year, only having 11 goals and 23 points in 39 games, but is on pace to have his second highest career total behind last year's. So Vatrano's been a very fantastic piece there for the Ducks. He's also been a really good veteran leader with some of their younger players. He's been quite well in the top 6 with guys like Zegras and Terry and Oche and McTavish and players like that. So Vatrano's a really good veteran to have around. I thought there would have been a very likely potentiality that they would have dealt him at the deadline if he wasn't signed, given the fact he was a pending UFA and they could have gotten a massive return for him, but he winds up signing. Apparently he likes playing in Anaheim, and the Ducks really like having a solid veteran like him around. So an interesting pickup there, but the Ducks have signed Frank Vatrano, who's been a solid top 6 forward over the past couple of years in Anaheim, to a 3-year contract extension that'll be going to start next year. So it's an interesting signing from our past couple of days, but it was the only signing we've seen from our past couple of days. Next, we're going to a couple of injury updates. When it comes to injury updates, we do have a couple of things to talk about here. First, Robert Bortuzzo in Utah was placed in injury reserve with a lower body injury after being injured on Thursday. So that's a bad blow for Utah and definitely a bad blow for Bortuzzo. Bortuzzo was on Thursday getting back from injury, and now he's going back on injury reserve. So it's a horrible blow there for Utah to see Bortuzzo go back. Well, Sean Jersey and John Marino were both full participants in practice and are still scheduled to return potentially at some point later January or early February. So that could be a big boost there for Utah. Their defense hasn't been the same since Sean Jersey left, and John Marino hasn't played at all this year for Utah. So to get those two back, who are solid top 4 defensemen, would be a massive boost for Utah, who's still hovering around the playoff race right now. So that could be a big boost there for Utah if they could get those two back. But bad blow to see Bortuzzo be placed in injury reserve. Dakota Joshua was injured on Friday, left that game with a lower body injury and was placed in injury reserve, so it's a bad blow there for the Canucks. Joshua's been a really good forward there for the Canucks over the past couple of weeks, so to see him be going down with with an injury is not overly great. San Jose's William Eklund was activated off of injury reserve and returned to game action after missing just over 2 weeks with upper body injury. So really great news there for the Sharks to see Eklund get back from his injury. Well, Jake Wallman, who has been out for a few games now, has been placed in injury reserve with a lower body injury. Once again, it's mostly just to make some roster moves. So I think Wallman should be able to be back whenever he's healthy. So that could be a really good boost there for the Sharks. But Wallman has been placed in injury reserve. And Carl Granstrom was a full participant at practice and could be nearing a return in the not too distant future from his undisclosed injury. So hopefully Granstrom can get back in the not too distant future. But it's good to see Eklund get back. And Wallman, who has missed a couple of games, has been placed in injury reserve. Pittsburgh's Philip Tomasino left Friday's game with a lower body injury and will miss a week or two after being placed on injury reserve. So it's a bad blow there for the Penguins. Tomasino's been a fantastic pickup from Nashville, so that's a bad blow there for Pittsburgh. Well, Chris Letang was activated from injury reserve and returned to game action after missing time with an injury. So great news to see Letang get back after he missed a couple of games with an injury, but bad blow to see Philip Tomasino be placed in injury reserve. New York Islanders' Isaiah George is suffering from upper body injury and is out day to day. So one of the Islanders' bright young defensemen on that team is currently suffering with an injury, so that's not overly great news there for the Islanders. Los Angeles' Trevor Moore was activated from injury reserve and returned to game action after missing just over 3 weeks with upper body injury. So that's great news there for the Kings to see Moore get back off of injury reserve. Well, Trevor Lewis was activated from injury reserve and returned to game action after missing just over a month with a lower body injury. So Moore and Lewis had both missed significant amount of time over the past little while. So to see both those guys, that's all bottom six and top six forward, get back into the lineup is great news there for Los Angeles. Austin Matthews was activated from injury reserve and returned to game action on Saturday after he missed 6 games with upper body injury. So Matthews has been in and out of the lineup this year due to injuries, but he had a brilliant game against Boston over on Saturday in his return. So really great news to see Matthews back for Toronto. Well, Jake McCabe left Sunday's game with the upper body injury and didn't return, and he's now out on IR with his injury. So it's a bad blow there for the Leafs to see McCabe be out with upper body injury. He's one of their top defensemen, so to see him be out for any significant period of time is a really bad blow for Toronto. Detroit's Jeff Petrie missed Saturday's game with an undisclosed injury in his day-to-day, so solid third pair of defensemen. To lose him is not overly great news there for Detroit, and he'll be out for the next little while. Another depth defenseman who's out is Jacob Bryson, as he missed Saturday's game with an illness in his day-to-day, so a couple of decent depth defensemen in Bryson and Petrie are currently out for the Sabres and the Red Wings respectively. Seattle's Yanni Gourde missed Saturday's game with a lower body injury and was placed on injury reserve, so that's a bad blow there for the Kraken. Gourde's been a solid bottom six forward, so to see him be placed in injury reserve, it's not really great news. When it comes to Joey Lacourde, who hasn't played since December 22nd and has missed a handful of games now, he has also been placed in injury reserve with upper body injury, so that's not too surprising. As soon as Lacourde's healthy, he should be able to be activated, but that's a really bad blow there for the Kraken to see Lacourde be placed in injury reserve. Vegas's Victor Olofsson missed Saturday's game with an illness in his day-to-day, but could return as early as Tuesday's games, so that could be a really big boost to see Olofsson get back, but bad news to see him miss Saturday's game. Well, Nicholas Roy, who hasn't played since mid-December, practiced in a non-contact jersey, but is still out with upper body injury, so very likely chance Roy is going to miss at least another week, maybe 2, so we're going to have to wait and see on what happens with Nick Roy. But that's good news that he's starting to practice in a non-contact jersey. Hayden Fleury was also skating in a non-contact jersey recently and could be nearing a return from his current injury right now, so that could be a really good boost there. Fleury's a decent 6th-7th defenseman, so to see him go back for the Jets could be a really big boost. Scott Wedgwood doesn't have a high ankle sprain and should hopefully be back in the next 2 to maybe 3 weeks for the Colorado Avalanche, so good news to see that's not a serious injury for Wedgwood and that he should be back in a couple of weeks' time for Colorado. Ottawa's Linus Ullmark, who has missed 5 games now with injury, is out week to week, so it's a horrible blow there for Senators to see their star-level goaltender Ullmark be out for the next couple of weeks. While decent depth defenseman and third pair defenseman Travis Hamonic will miss 2 to 4 weeks with a lower body injury. That's a horrible blow there for the Senators to see Hamonic go down with an injury, and hopefully he won't miss too much time with that injury. While Nashville's Jeremy Lauzon was placed in injury reserve after suffering a lower body injury, so Lauzon, who's been in and out of the lineup this year due to injuries, is back on IR, so a bad blow there for the Predators. New Jersey's Eric Hall is out day to day with an ankle injury and will miss at least some time, so probably going to be out at least a couple of weeks if not longer, so that's a horrible blow there for the Devils, who lose their 3-3 for the next little while. William Carrier missed Sunday's game with a lower body injury in his day to day, so decent bomb 6-4 that's not there for the Carolina Hurricanes right now, so that's a bad blow there. Well, Jared Spurgeon, who we've already mentioned is dealing with a lower body injury and probably going to be out a couple of weeks, has not surprisingly been placed in injury reserve, so it's just to help the Wild with some of their roster movements. So Spurgeon, I think as soon as he's healthy, should be able to get back, but that's a bad blow there for the Wild to see Spurgeon on injury reserve. But those are all the injury updates from our past couple of days. Good to see guys like Matthews, Moore, Letang, and Eklund all return from game action action. Hopefully they don't look too rusty in their returns, but bad news to see guys like Joshua, Tomasino, Gourde, and Ullmark all be out with injuries, and hopefully they won't be out for an overly long period of time. But those are some interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of waiver updates. First, back over on Saturday, we saw the New Jersey Devils place Nick DeSimone on waivers. Now, Devils have a really deep defense, have a solid couple of young prospects who should be coming up in not too distant future, so they didn't really have a whole bunch of need for DeSimone at the NHL level, and he's mostly an AHL player who's gotten some stints at the NHL level, so they need to send him down on waivers, place him on waivers. I was expecting him to probably clear given the fact that he's more of an AHLer, but actually he has been claimed, as Utah claims Nick DeSimone off of waivers on Sunday. So that's an interesting pickup there for Utah. We know they just lost Dakota Mermis on waivers after the Leafs reclaimed him back after they placed him on waivers a couple of weeks ago and lost him to Utah. So we know that Utah should be able to get guys like John Marino and Sean Durzi back in not just in future, but they're not going to be back immediately, so they still need some depth on the defensive end. So they pick up Nick DeSimone, who can be a serviceable 6th, 7th guy, and someone who can come in if there's some injuries. So that's a pretty decent pickup there for Utah to get a serviceable third pair of defenseman, Nick DeSimone. And then back over on Sunday, we also saw Arthur Kailyev be placed on waivers by the Los Angeles Kings. Now, Kailyev has missed the entirety of the first half of the season due to an injury that he suffered in the preseason. We know that Kailyev wanted a fresh start, and the Kings wanted to start him off in the AHL, maybe see how he does in the AHL, and then maybe call him up. I thought because he was coming off of an injury, very likely chance that he would wind up clearing, but I thought maybe with his contract, because he's only signed for 1 year, $800,000, and has some NHL upside, maybe a team or two could wind up claiming him, and one team did, and that is the New York Rangers. The Rangers, who are currently still in no man's land right now, where they're out of a playoff spot and not doing overly well, have claimed Kailyev, so this could be a decent pickup there. We know that the Rangers could definitely use some more offensive help. I think Kailyev could help as like a solid third line forward there for the Rangers, so I think this could be a really good pickup there for the Rangers. Like we said, Kailyev wanted a fresh start, so he's going to get it here. I'm not exactly sure if the Rangers were the best landing spot for Kailyev, given they still have a lot of really good NHL talent, but I think Kailyev could be a serviceable third line forward there for the Rangers, and maybe sort of jumpstart the offense a little bit, as long as he's looking good after his injuries. So some interesting injury updates there, but those are only two we saw. We saw Kailyev be placed on waivers by LA, and DeSimone be placed on waivers by New Jersey, and Utah claimed DeSimone, and the Rangers claimed Kailyev. So a couple of interesting waiver claims from our past couple of days. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. Now first, we're going to talk about the Montreal Canadiens, and when it comes to them, TVA Sports Habs insider Rene Lavoie was talking about Jake Evans, and he thinks that there's a potential extension coming for Jake Evans to the Montreal Canadiens. A lot of people have been speculating that Evans, who's had a very good last couple of games, putting in some really good goals, really sort of producing well offensively over this really good Canadiens stretch over the past couple of games. A lot of people have thought that Evans, with him being in the final year of his deal at a $1.7 million cap, hit, being a serviceable third line center, that a lot of teams would have some interest in him, and maybe he would be dealt to the trade deadline. Well, Lavoie thinks that there's a very likely chance an extension is coming instead of a trade. He says that if the Canadiens wind up giving him something like a 3-year extension with maybe a bump of like $1.5 million to around a $3 million cap hit, it wouldn't be overly bad with the cap going up right now, and that would sort of be a solid pay bump for Evans and a solid keeping of a young player for Montreal. So I do think there's a possibility with Evans being one of the younger UFAs they have. Like, they have Dvorak, we talked about him. They have Armia, we talked about him. They've talked about Savard as well. There's a very likely chance they could trade a couple of these UFAs. I know they're in a really tight race for a playoff spot right now, but I think there's a very likely chance they will still sell at the trade deadline. But Evans is one of the younger guys, so if there was anyone to have more of a likelihood of signing an extension rather than being dealt, I think it would be Evans. And Evans has fit in really well as like a solid third line center for the Montreal Canadiens team this year. So I sort of agree with Lavoie. I do think there's a possibility here for an extension, but still I wouldn't rule out the possibility of a trade, especially if there's a team out there who really likes Evans and sort of surprises the Canadiens and gives them an offer they really can't refuse. But I think there's a possibility that we could see Evans wind up getting moved. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But according to Lavoie, he thinks there's a very likely chance that we could see Evans sign an extension. He doesn't know exactly when, but he says that potentially in the not distant future we could see Evans sign an extension in Montreal. Next, we'll go to Ottawa Senators. For the Senators, we have a couple of things to talk about here, but mainly it revolves around the goaltending. We talked about this in our injury update about how Linus Ullmark is currently injured and it's going to be out for a couple of weeks at least for the Ottawa Senators, and that, according to Bruce Garrioch, just sort of turned the Ottawa Senators' focus to the goaltending market. He says that the Senators are currently checking in on a couple of goaltenders, such as Primeau in Montreal, who was just cleared off of waivers, James Reimer in Buffalo, who's been their backup for the past little while, and Ducks starter John Gibson, who's been a solid player. Now, Gibson makes it don't think too much sense. He's got $6.4 million on his cap hit. I think he's got 2 years left after this year, and he's more of a starter. And with Ullmark making 8.25 after this year for the next 4 seasons, I don't really think they want to bring in Gibson. They have a couple of decent prospects in Maryland and Sogard, who I think could be serviceable backups to Ullmark. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, but I don't think they go after Gibson. But it seems like it possible they could try and go after maybe like a short-term stopgap guy. A couple names that come to mind would be like a Vladar in Calgary, a guy like Vejmelka in Utah, maybe a Husso in Detroit. Like, those are just names that come to my mind, besides the 3 names that Garrioch mentioned. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there, but Ottawa is in a little bit of a goaltending bind with Ullmark out with a couple of weeks right now, as Forsberg and Maryland are all right goaltenders and they've shown flashes, but they're not the consistent good goaltending they've been getting since Ullmark was there. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there, but Ottawa does seem to be in the goalie market after the Ullmark injury, and there's a very likely chance we could see the Senators make some sort of a goalie move at some point, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to the Vancouver Canucks, we have more things to discuss when it comes to potential trades for JT Miller and Elliotte Pettersson. Now we're going to start with Elliotte Pettersson here. According to William James of Philly Hockey Now, he thinks that the Flyers could be a landing spot for Elliotte Pettersson. Now, we talked about this before. I think it was in our last couple of videos about how Cousins could be a potential landing spot for Philadelphia because the Flyers don't have an overly great center depth. Well, Pettersson could be also a really good fit there for Philadelphia Flyers. Now, according to William James, his proposal would be Elliotte Pettersson get dealt to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for Scott Laughton, young prospect Jet Luchenko, and 1 or 2 first-round picks. Now, none of these really help the top 6 of the Vancouver Canucks this year. Like, Laughton's a decent bomb 6'4", but he's not a second-line center. Luchenko might eventually be a second-line center, but he's not going to be for the next couple of years. And the draft picks are just draft picks. So he does realize, James does, in this article, that it would not really fit the need for Vancouver, which Elliotte Friedman said they're sort of prioritizing a center that they want back in return and some sort of a deal for Pettersson or Miller. So he does recognize that, but it would be an interesting deal. Like, Luchenko's a solid young prospect who made the Flyers at training camp before being sent back down. He looks like he has a very fantastic future. Like, eventually I think it could be a solid top 6 center for the Canucks, but it wouldn't be for the next 2, maybe 3 years. For Laughton, he'll be a serviceable third-line center for the next couple of years, but he wouldn't be that second-line center that they have in Elliotte Pettersson right now. And then they also get a couple of draft picks. So would this be a decent trade value for Pettersson? I think it's possible. I think it's very likely that that could be a really good trade value for Pettersson, but it's not something I think would help the Canucks now. So I personally don't think that the Canucks will pull a trigger on this deal. But it is interesting to note that maybe there's a potentiality there for the Flyers to hook up on a deal with the Vancouver Canucks. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. When it comes to the Chicago Blackhawks, Elliotte Friedman was talking about them and says that if the JT Miller stuff is real and Miller is available, that the Hawks should be all over that. Miller's a really good veteran leader. He's a solid top 6 forward, can produce well, has that sort of veteran leadership, and something that the Hawks could definitely use, especially with a young guy like Connor Bedard in that team right now. So it would be interesting to note. Now, I know that if the Canucks were to move Miller, they would want a heavy asking price. So the Hawks do have a lot of really good prospects, a lot of really good picks. Don't have a whole bunch of really good players right now, like young NHL players. They do have a couple of decent players that they could probably throw, like maybe Frank Nazar in that sort of a deal, maybe one of their young defensemen that they have, like maybe a first-round pick. I think they have a couple of extra ones. They could probably throw in maybe one of their veterans that they have on the forward group. Like, it'll be an interesting deal to pull off, but I could see the Hawks have enough assets to sort of pull off a deal. So I'm not sure if this is the exact move the Hawks really want to do right now with where they are at that point in their rebuild, but Miller would be a solid veteran add for that team for years to come, and I think could be a really solid target there. So while I don't think it's the right move for them right now, I do see why they may have some interest on what Elliotte Friedman would say they should be all in on JT Miller. And the last one was that there was a proposed trade, according to a couple of reports, between the Rangers and the Canucks. The Rangers apparently offered 1-for-1 Miller for Zibanejad, and the Canucks said no. So it seems that the Canucks are really wanting a massive return. Zibanejad has not an overly great start to the season, while Miller has. So you can see why they would probably want more for Miller than just Zibanejad. My guess would be if they really wanted to try and make some sort of a deal, they would try and get Keandre Miller in that sort of a deal. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there, but there's been some reports that there was a deal offered by the Rangers for Miller that involved just Zibanejad, and the 1-for-1 deal was shot down by the Vancouver Canucks. So it seems that the Canucks, if they do want to move Miller and Pettersson, they're going to be looking for a high asking price. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this video down in the comment section below. What do you think about the Canucks? Was it the right move for the Canucks to shoot down a potential 1-for-1 deal for Miller for Zibanejad? Do you think it was the right move for the Canucks? Do you think it was the wrong move? Do you think Miller could end up in Chicago? Do you think Pettersson could end up in Philadelphia? Definitely love to get your thoughts on that. What do you think about Ottawa? Do they go after a goaltender? Could they go after a guy like John Gibson, or is it more likely they go after a lower guy with some shorter term contract like a Primeau or a Reimer or a Vejmelka or a Vladar? Definitely love to get your thoughts on that. Do you think Evans and the Montreal Canadiens will sign an extension after this in the future? And if so, what sort of return do you think they could get? Or do you think Evans will still wind up getting moved by Montreal? Plus, I'd love to get your thoughts on the waiver updates, injury updates, and signings for the past couple days. Definitely get your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Until this video, if you're listening, subscribe below. Thank you for all your support. We know to love you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section below so something I'll discuss in this video. I also have a blog talking about news, rumors, and analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll link down in the description below. And kind of see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.